Do you want to start with Alabama?
Sure. I would love to. Tell me about the Tide.
I just mentioned the Crimson Tide. So
Yeah.
Alabama played their A-Day game, as it's known, back on Easter weekend. Do you remember the episode of The Simpsons with Mr. Burns and the softball team?
Of course.
It was a little bit like that. A little bit like that, because it's just a team of killers.
Yeah.
It's a team of killers, and they're probably going to win the SEC, at least the SEC West, let's say, not to offend Georgia folks. Probably make the playoff, maybe the title. They'll get 7 more guys drafted next year, and then we'll be right back here next May, and the cycle's going to repeat. This is where we're at with Alabama football at this point, for better or worse. So what's in focus, I think, at this very early juncture is that Alabama is starting with an embarrassment of riches.
Mm-hmm.
This has been the deal, as you know, for the last decade?
Yeah.
Frankly, it's sort of like cliche at this point.
Yeah.
It's a
So what's
super talented
interesting?
Alabama team.
What's interesting? What's new?
What's interesting is this. Let me continue on my plight here.
Okay.
What's interesting as a starting point is that you've got both Bryce Young and Will Anderson back. Bryce Young won the Heisman. Will Anderson, by many folks, should have been more in the running for the Heisman. So whenever you start there with those two guys,
Yeah.
your floor is like 10 wins. Don't cry for Alabama. Your floor is 10 wins.
Yeah.
What we got a little bit more clarity on, I think, in this game is what it looks like behind Bryce Young. Behind Bryce Young, it seems clear that Jalen Milroe is going to be the backup quarterback. Bill O'Brien really liked what he saw from him. He had like 180 total yards, something like that. It sounds as if, per Nick Saban, they may end up drawing up some packages specifically for him that they'll use during the season, regardless of whether or not Bryce Young is hurt or healthy. Right. They just like what they saw from him. They think he gives them a lot. So that's interesting. It's interesting to see that they might try to use his services, even though he's not the starting quarterback.
Right.
I was looking hard at the margins here. It is Alabama. This is a really good team. 3 areas that to me are, I guess, a little blurry. The first thing is the receiving core.
Yeah.
Jamison Williams, John Mechie, gone. That's 250 targets walking out the door that they need to replace. Now, Jermaine Burton comes over via transfer from Georgia. He figures to be wide receiver 1. But it is sort of an open question beyond him who the names are going to be and in what order they're going to fall. Christian Leary had a really good game. Really nice spring game, something like 10 targets. He had a 57-yard touchdown pass. Perhaps he will factor in. Perhaps some of the freshmen coming later this year will also provide additional support. For whatever it's worth, and again, I recognize this is spring and you can't glean too much into spring. Bryce Young did seem a little bit out of sync here. With new targets out there, he forced some passes. It's all going to work itself out eventually.
They lost a receiver to Texas, right? It was kind of kicked off the team. Yeah, Hall.
Right.
J.A. Hall. Yeah, J.A. Hall.
It's all going to work itself out in time, but for whatever it's worth, he did seem a bit out of sync. Still looks very good, but was a little bit out of sync. What I do think you'll see, and what I've seen a few folks comment on, and perhaps some of what Bryce Young did in the spring game is indicative of where they're headed. I think Cameron Latu will be a little bit more involved at tight end. He'll be a little bit more involved in the passing game this year. I think Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield.
Yeah, he's going to be ridiculous. Yeah.
Is another name to watch, right? We're going to talk a lot about Jahmyr Gibbs. He was the MVP of this game. He broke off like a 75-yard touchdown run. He looked really, really solid, the transfer from Georgia Tech. But Nick Saban's really keen on the skill set that he brings out of the backfield. Yeah. So in lieu of some concrete names out wide, you've got Latu, your big tight end, who was productive in the postseason, catching touchdowns. And then also Jahmyr Gibbs, who comes over from Tech, who we know is a dynamic player. That can cover up some warts in the downfield passing game, as it were, as it relates to wide receivers until you sort those names out. So a little bit blurry, a little bit uncertain, but it's Alabama, and yes, they have options. That's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
No, the offense should be terrific, and you have the continuity of B.O.B. back calling the plays and more comfortable with what Bryce Young can and can't do, and mostly that's can.
Sure.
New left tackle with Evan Neal off to the NFL. That's
That's where I'm
going to
go
affect
next.
the rhythm of things. But Alabama has, this is by their own standards, a little uneven at developing top-level offensive linemen, especially on the inside at times these past few years, but still, again, at that standard. But yeah, I mean, I'm still not terribly worried about Alabama's
No, I'm not worried
offense.
either, but you bring up the line, and the line is
Yeah.
my second point of blurriness, if you want to call it that. There were 15 sacks in this game. Bryce Young took 10 of them.
Yeah.
Most of that was pressure from the edges. Now, look, they weren't playing with a full deck here. There were some guys who were out. Obviously, Evan Neal got drafted 7th overall by the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
So they're without him. They're going to have to replace that production. It is unclear whether or not it's that the line is still developing and that they were just without guys, or if it's because the defense is so damn good.
Yeah,
It could be that the defense is just so damn good
that
it doesn't matter who it is, nobody's going to block them. So a little blurry. They got to figure out the line thing. I think they will in due time. Again, it's Alabama. Depth is not usually a problem there. But if any indication, the spring game, there was a lot of pressure on all of the quarterbacks in this game, 15 total sacks, and they're going to have to figure that out in time for the season. My hunch is that it won't be that bad once we get to September, but just a talking point. And then the third and final thing that I'd mention, and it's not really a point of curiosity. It's not even really that blurry. It's just a uniquely Alabama problem at cornerback. Pete Golding, their defensive coordinator, said that he's most concerned about the cornerback position.
Yeah.
The problem for everyone else is that this isn't really a problem for Alabama. The problem is that they've got 3 guys who could all be cornerback 1. Could be Kool-Aid McKinstry. Could be Kyrie Jackson. Could be Eli Ricks, although he recently got arrested. Just saw that today, which is not good for his standing in this race. But all 3 of those guys in some way, shape, or form could end up being the first cornerback. Just because they don't know how they stack up, I assume that's why Pete Golding's a little bit unnerved by the position group at the moment. But clearly they have enough talent that by the time the live bullets start to fly, they will have this thing in good working order. They still have Jordan Battle, by the way, at the back end of that defense, which tends to, again, paper over some sins. So I feel pretty good about Alabama. There's no reason not to, but at least as the spring game goes, those are a few areas that I think we demand more answers throughout the rest of the preseason here as we get closer to Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, I mean, since 2018, Alabama has not really fielded a top 10 defense. This is, again, by the Alabama standard, that the Alabama offense has been so explosive that it does put its own defense into a bit of a predicament by being on the field as much as they have been at times. But, counterpoint, Will Anderson can get you off a field pretty quickly. Will Anderson. So I am not terribly concerned about Alabama because, I don't know, when you have a weapon like that and when you've built up the depth that they have, especially you mentioned Jordan Battle in the back end of that defense, it's still a question. Like, this is as interesting an offensive SEC as we've had now that Arkansas has a lot more firepower. Ole Miss obviously making quarterback transition, but Mississippi State should be dangerous. A&M, LSU, dangerous in their own ways that they have experience, but we don't know exactly what either of those teams are going to be doing offensively. But it's as intriguing a depth of offense in the SEC as we've seen in some time. So that just puts more pressure on the Alabama defense. So, yeah, it'll be fascinating.